So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are. Thank you for joining us for this latest version of our podcast. My name is Richard Young, and I am delighted today to be recording this podcast here in what is now sunny Boston at what is my 14th Viva R&D Summit. And I'm even more excited that my special guest today is Jim Riley. Jim looks after the whole of R&D strategy here at Viva, and I'm very excited to gather his thoughts on Summit, but also his thoughts on some of the latest learnings from all the discussions he's had at this summit, and really keen to get his thoughts on what's next for our industry and where we're headed. So without further ado, Jim, thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Richard.
I do really want to get your thoughts on Summit, but there may be a few of our viewers and listeners who perhaps don't know you as well as I do.
Probably more than a few.
Just a few. So maybe I could ask you just to introduce yourself, your role a bit more appropriately than I did, but also touching on your background in terms of Villanova, in terms of Accenture, and now your role here at Viva.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. So I am a Pennsylvanian here in the United States. I have lived in and around the Philadelphia area for most of my life. Go Phillies and Eagles. I went to school also in Pennsylvania, in the Northeast, the University of Scranton, and then also Villanova University for my graduate degree. I was also in a PhD program, and it's really how I got introduced to pharmaceuticals. I was in a PhD program for pharmacology and physiology, and within a year realized that the lab setting was not for me, but what was for me was the people and the idea of science improving people's lives. So I was lucky enough to get a job out of the classified ads, if you remember those, in the newspaper, at a small boutique consulting firm called Octagon Research Solutions, who were one of the first organizations to bring digital to the world of what was then paper in pharmaceuticals. After 12 years at that startup, which I really enjoyed through my career, startups are a place where you get to wear many hats, as you know, that organization was acquired by Accenture. And that's where I really got to grow my consulting chops in the industry, spending a lot of time with large and mid-tier pharma about their journeys and improving the way they operate and the way they run trials. I was always someone that was passionate about technology. And Accenture was a great place to get exposure to a lot of technologies and understand sometimes what good didn't look like. And so in that time at Accenture, I started to see what was happening. A lot of organizations were moving to the cloud. And I saw this little company called Viva starting to really crop up. And a colleague of mine who's still here today, John Laurie, came calling and said, "Hey Jim, you should come see what's happening here at Viva." And that was 8.5 years ago. So I joined Viva then as part of the regulatory strategy team, and haven't looked back since.
Perfect. I didn't know that about the labs actually. So I think I was a biochemist in education who learnt only one thing in his first 2 years: don't put me in a lab. So we have that in common, so that's good. Let me jump into time at Viva, because I joined about 1.5 years after you. And one of the things that impressed me was this concept of kind of mission, vision, and values.
Yes.
And we live it.
Yeah, we do.
So I wonder if I could ask you to use your own words to share a bit of that, and perhaps just bring it up to date as we've explained it over the last few days.
Yeah, that's a good one, Richard. You know, the mission, as we know, is building the industry cloud for life sciences, and to me, that's always meant bringing a new way of working with technology to improve the way life sciences works. And the values are really things that are important to me as well that I've personalized. You know, probably first and foremost is that do the right thing value. Doing the right thing is ethics. It's, as Peter, as you know, often says, your parent looking over your shoulder, what would you do, what decision would you make? Yep. And that's always been part of my lifeblood, to make the right decisions in life. And so that spoke to me, and I think that speaks to our team in the way that we think about driving customer success and value. You know, we're not the kind of organization that makes things up, that relies on marketing and fluff. We really deliver what we say we're going to do. And the fact that we do that with speed is what's always impressed me as well. You know, I look at the summit, in fact, and I go to some of these roadmap sessions that we run, and it never ceases to amaze me how much we build every 4 months into our products. It's just mind-boggling.
We've seen a large number of conversations here at Summit, which we're going to come on to, about the conversion to PBC.
Yeah.
Maybe I can actually jump that in here now, because you've walked into the question, but converting from do the right thing to public benefit corporation, do you see that as a big change or a small change?
In the way that Viva operates, I think it's a small change, actually, because the idea of the public benefit corporation to align to the values of more than just the shareholder, but all the stakeholders, the people who are the patients in trials or our customers, that's always been part of Viva's lifeblood and mission. It was really cementing that operational mindset and having the support of our board to do that, which is really what the change was. So to me, it was something that was more formal, that had to be done, but really didn't change the way that Viva was already operating.
Agree. Good. So let's use that as a lead into Summit. We're almost at the end. It's been 2.5, 3 days.
Are you as exhausted as I am?
Just about. I could just about remember my own name at this point,
Yeah.
but that's good. But I asked you about the values. How do you think that embodies Summit or encapsulates Summit, or what do you hope people experience at Summit based on our values?
So one of the values that I hadn't mentioned is customer success. And we often talk about this event as not a Viva event, but an industry event. And the reason for that is because after the keynotes and maybe the roadmap session where it is Viva up on the stage, it is customers. It's customers sharing as a sponsor or as a CRO or as a research site, even as we're seeing, their experience. And yes, it's sometimes through the lens of what they've done with Viva technology, but it's really about that larger view of the way in which they're improving how they operate, improving the way they're running trials. And so that's what I'm feeling here yet again at the summit, is that it really is about the industry people talking about industry progress. It's not as much about Viva and what we're doing. And that's how I know it's a good summit.
Yeah. I have to say, it's my 14th summit. It is the biggest yet. I think it was near 3,000 people, maybe a tad either
Somewhere
way.
around there, yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen so many sidebar conversations, and what I've enjoyed is you introduce two people and you leave.
Yeah.
Let customers talk to customers, and I've seen that everywhere. What would you say were your highlights of Summit?
Well, let's see. We had a round table on the first day with many executives from large pharma organizations and mid-tier pharma. And that was the right kind of meeting with that group, because it was what I would call healthy tension.
Yep.
Meaning we were really challenging ourselves on things that are topical and that matter. Things like how to engage with research sites, how to think about the patient's thought process as they enter a trial, how to think about the way that they leverage technology to drive outcomes. And there were great varying perspectives on that no one was holding back. And I think that's the right kind of meeting you want to have with folks that are in those roles. So that was certainly a highlight. And then if I think about the event proper, the clinical keynote where we were joined by Penny Carlson from Takeda. Takeda's on this incredible mission to change the way that they operate, really, in clinical, which was an organization that mostly outsourced to one that now mostly insources. They call this Future Fit. And Penny shared that journey and the journey they're on and how they're improving, and the fact that it still is a work in progress. She shared that Viva is a part of that, but we're not the only part. Of course, it's about their organization, and it's about the way they behave. And so the fact that she shared that very openly with the audience, you saw a lot of head nodding, and when you know it really works, you saw a lot of people coming up to her at the end. I think there was a line of 20 people that were waiting to talk to Penny. So that's another one, and it's that kind of thing when you know a session is good, because afterwards, the speakers, the customers are talking to one another. And I think that was a microcosm of that feeling.
You also led, perhaps I won't call it a correction, a clarification of some of our thinking about the future of clinical trials. Would you mind just taking a second to reflect upon that? Do you think it resonated well? Do you think it's part of a journey we're on? What are you thinking about how we explain that?
Yeah, the message that we shared is that, when we really think about what we're attempting to do through technology, it's about improving clinical research. And we're improving clinical research with technology because we're looking for ways to simplify and make the process of trials more consistent. And when you really look at it, the research happens at the research site. It doesn't happen at the pharma company. It happens between the research site and the patient or participant. And when you realize that fact, where you need to optimize is where that's happening. And unfortunately in our industry, we haven't optimized as well as we could have for that experience. Research sites have dozens of systems that are thrust upon them, and with no negative intent, because it was the world that we were all living, where sponsors are asking them to log in with a unique credential, a unique login for that sponsor versus that sponsor versus that sponsor. And you think about your daily life, it'd be like having 20 email accounts. You know, you're held back. There's too many channels. And so, you know, what we're really after here with the new products we announced of Viva ID, the study portal, and the way in which we're bringing sites into the ecosystem of the sponsor's technology, it really is about driving a new level of standardization and consistency. And we think if that's done, that will truly improve clinical research.
So we come back to one of the early questions, because I just want to pick up on that. How does being a PBC influence that piece that you just said?
It's a good one, and I failed to mention what really brings this together, which is the idea that many of these research sites have barely any, if any, budget to speak of. They're funded by sponsors or by government entities, and that means that when it comes to needing good technology, they can't afford it. A lot of the providers that offer technology to research sites, given that that's really all they do, they need to make a profit, and so they need to sell their technology to research sites. And that's a challenge, because if the research site doesn't have budget, how are they going to afford a good technology? And so one of the things we decided very early on was any of that technology we would build for the research sites would be free. Okay. And that really aligns well with that public benefit operating model, because it is about the benefit of the trials overall. If you make that free, it's much more accessible. And making good technology accessible, we think, is key to making the clinical trial process more productive.
So you're offering it for free, pushing towards standardization, which we can then all build from effectively. Okay. Now, there may be someone out there who's saying, PBC sounds very interesting. What sort of investment within the realms of what you can share does it take to build something world-class like SiteVault, like Viva ID, and push it out to hundreds and thousands of sites?
Yeah, so no dollar value to put on that, really. I wouldn't even know it. But I can talk about it in terms of people terms. And this really is a part of Viva's operating model, as you know, Richard. Whenever we set out to build a capability, a product, we do it with the intent that it operates in an autonomous way, as though it's its own company within a company, startup. And so the site area was no different. When we decided we were going to go into the site space, we did so by saying, what kind of folks do we need to hire? People that have research site backgrounds, people that have technology backgrounds in the site space, people that know how to market to sites, to talk to them. And so just like all of our other business units, it is that startup idea. It's that concept of an organization within an organization, because that's focus. And you need focus to build things the right way.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Now, I want to come back to Summit, but I want to build off what you just said. You've mentioned Penny from Takeda. She was fantastic. But what else, or who else perhaps has inspired you over the last 2 days?
Well, one group that has inspired me is our product teams. I managed to sit through 2 roadmap sessions where our teams share what's coming next in short term and the long term. And it still never ceases to amaze me the pace that we managed to execute upon. You know, the features, the capability sets. I was in one of the roadmaps for the ePro space, the technology for patients, and just everything from, you know, right to left language support to multiple types of surveys coming in to a different form factor for the experience. And it's all coming now. And I was just like, how is this happening that fast? Yeah. And it's because it is a devoted team that think of themselves as a company within a company. Yeah.
I have to say, it feels like every new product, and we announced 7 new ones as well, we might come on to that, but I think every new product feels like it gets faster and faster to a high quality product. And I don't wish to ever belittle anyone's efforts. There's a lot of work going into that, but is that a sign of Vault maturing and Viva maturing as well? So maybe our starting point is a little bit further ahead?
Yeah, you know, one of the reasons that Viva's been able to deliver the way that we have is because of that notion of having a platform, the platform being Vault. If any organization was attempting to build all of these technology solutions, the 30-odd something tools that we have, people have tried that, but they've tended to either build them individually or acquire them. And when you do that, you're basically acquiring different code bases, different technologies, and you have to stitch all that together. It also means that you have to maintain it at different levels of pace. With Vault as a primary vehicle for the way we do technology, we can get that head start. That we have all of the key capabilities underlying what you need in this complicated life sciences arena that acts as that starting point. So it is the foundation, yeah.
Now, I'm obviously clinical data, that's what I am. But you are a lot more in terms of your breadth, and so is Viva. You talked about the vision of building a true platform, the broadest platform. What about regulatory? What about quality? What about the other areas? You're thinking, what were the big announcements there? What do you think is the big push in those areas?
Sure. So as you rightly point out, Viva and what we offer to the industry is more than just clinical. And I will never get close to the depth of knowledge that you have in that arena. You are a true expert. But what I do know a lot about is the way in which the development process runs end to end. And that's really that vision of what we're doing in the development cloud, is to be the technology foundation for product development and manufacturing. And so to do that right, as we talked about earlier, you have to have focus. And so we have teams that focus on regulatory and safety and quality. And some of the nice announcements there that are interesting is safety, for instance. That's our newest product area. It's only 3 or 4 years old. We started in safety for the events collection and processing of adverse events. But now we're really starting to spread our wings with things like safety docs. And then what we announced here at the summit are 2 new capabilities that really will complete the overall picture of safety, and that is the workbench and signal. Because you need these more advanced reporting capabilities and ability to use signals from the noise to make better decisions in safety. And so when those arrive in the next year or so, that's really going to be a game changer in the safety arena. And the other thing in regulatory, the regulatory space is one that's in many ways as an environment hasn't changed much. A regulatory team collects information from all of the domains, and they need to submit it to health authorities, and they need to track the approvals of those products over time. Sounds simple, but it's not. It's very complex because there's so many dimensions of products. Well, in regulatory, we really have completed that suite of capabilities that organizations need, from authoring the content to collecting it for submission, and now to publishing it and archiving it to all the health authorities worldwide. So although it wasn't a new product, it really feels like it's complete, and it provides everything that a company would need for regulatory.
So does complete mean you've finished?
So you would think by using the word complete means we're finished. Not quite, because the way which we develop product, as you know, is we have these releases every 4 months. And so even in regulatory, although the application areas, we've kind of filled in the gaps, there's still a lot more that we are doing to make them better. An example is the archive of submissions. We've made that completely flexible. We've redeveloped the entire application, and a lot of that was thanks to customers' feedback. So all of those applications will just keep improving based on the things we learned from the industry.
Cool. I want to come back to Penny's presentation a little bit, which she obviously led. What do you see, based from her and others, and the conversations you've been in, what do you see as the most compelling transformation? And maybe what I might mean by that is, where do you see customers going from today to tomorrow to the tomorrow that follows? Yeah. Are there patterns, are there trends that you would pick up from the last 2 days?
I suppose at least 2 things come to mind there. One is, and I know you and I have talked about this before, is matching the science with operational excellence. I think, unfortunately, the last 5 or 6 years with the advance of proteomics, genomics, personalized medicine, the science has outpaced the operational efficiency pretty significantly. But now you're really starting to see organizations, now that the science has started to settle, I say it in a simple sense, meaning there's not any new forms, it's more about personalized is the way to go. The operational efficiency is starting to catch up. The focus on how can I improve my operation internally at a sponsor or CRO, but also externally, the way in which they think about engaging with the patient and the research site. So in many ways, the things that Viva are focusing on now are really at the heart of the sort of zeitgeist of what's happening out there. People are focused on this. How do I improve my operation? But how do I also improve my engagement with the two key stakeholders, the research side and the patient?
Perfect. So, I can talk all day, but I'm conscious of time. I like to draw conclusions, but I want to give you the last word in a second. But there's always a question I like to reserve for everyone, and that's if I could give you a magic wand, and you could wave that wand, and one thing that you just want to dismiss from this industry, assigned to Room 101, never to be repeated, never to be done again. And if you could wave that same magic wand and create something, have something appear that we can't do today, what would those things be for you?
Besides replicating myself 3 times over, well, in clinical research especially, I think the way in which we find participants for research, there's this really and a necessary focus on diversity and inclusion in our industry, which is really important. We've not done well in terms of the populations of folks that we really direct research toward and make them aware of research. And I'm glad to see that the industry is finally moving that way, including the regulators. But to me, that's part of the picture. I think beyond just making them aware, it's also about making it easy. And I think when I hear these stories still of consent forms that are 50 and 70 pages long, I mean, can you imagine? To just take part in research, you're basically given War and Peace to read, and then have to make sense of it. And I think it's an example, it's not the only one, of where I think we can still really do better when it comes to engaging the patient and making it easy for them to enroll in research. To me, it needs to feel more like an extension of healthcare, and it's not there yet.
So not small wishes, quite big ones. Perfect. I'd love to give you the final thought. So I'd love you to perhaps share anything else you want to share, but in particular, there are people out there who perhaps have never been to a summit. Maybe we could close by you sharing your thoughts about this summit and summits to come, and what people can explain or expect from a summit, and why they should think about coming next time.
Yeah, and this one's easy because I just heard from some of our customers just prior to this recording, where I often ask customers, well, tell me about your experience. What was it like? And I consistently hear the same thing, which is the energy, the community around this event is unlike anything else they have ever seen. And it's because we're on a mission. And once they tend to join Veeva in what we're attempting to do as a partner in the industry, they feel like they're also part of that mission and part of that community. And so that's why I'd urge others to think about it for the future, because you get that over 2 days, that sense of being part of a community, but also that desire to really drive change in the industry.
Just want to check, it is only 2 days, isn't it? Because I feel like it's been longer than 2 days, in a good way.
It's not 2 days for you and I, Richard.
No, that's true. Cool. Jim, thank you very much. I know you're very busy. I really appreciate it. Your time is very well taken, and thank you for everything you've shared.
Thank you, Richard.
For those of you who've enjoyed this podcast, and I hope you have, please don't forget to subscribe for future episodes which will be coming along. And for those of you who haven't been here at Summit, you have missed a huge event, and I really hope we'll see you at future events. Thank you very much.